simply we're just kind of disposing ourselves to biology and essentially the providence of God is what it sounds like to me.
I think it's entirely reasonable.
How
It's
so?
just
Can
like
you?
Catholic doctrine.
Welcome back, everyone. Craig here. No Jonah, but I do have a guest, Mark. I want to introduce Mark here. I'm going to give him a chance to tell you a little bit about himself. I think, Mark, you showed up in our comments recently, and we started talking about some things, I think specifically sedevacantism, and that's the only time I'm going to say that word today because I will otherwise get it wrong. But um, uh, and we could certainly talk about anything else that we talk about on this channel that's important to you. But that was a topic that you had sort of expressed some comments about, and I don't know a lot about it, so I wanted to, you agreed to come on the show. So with that, Mark, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, give us any kind of background information you want in terms of your faith, religious perspective, that kind of stuff, and then we'll start talking.
Okay. So my name is Mark. I live in the U.S. I subscribe to the Sedevacantist position. So I'm a traditional Catholic. Um, this position holds that we haven't had a valid pope since Pope Pius XII, due to the Vatican II. We call it the apostasy, great apostasy. Um, and as can be seen with Francis, every single week there's something new, something crazy he's saying, Um, and it's not just Francis. His predecessors were even worse. Um, I used to belong to what we call the Vatican II sect, and the more I studied the traditional Catholic faith, started going to Latin masses more, the more I realized that this guy we call Francis isn't a valid pope, and then it just spiraled from there. So
When you say Vatican II sector, you're referring to the Novus Ordo.
yeah, the Novus Ordo Church.
Okay.
So,
And just so I can orient myself, and I don't need your age, but what decade of life are you in? Because you look younger than me, but I don't know.
yeah, I look younger than I actually am. I'm in my 30s. So
Okay. And are you single? You have family, anything like that?
I'm single. Yeah.
Okay. And did you grow up in the traditional sort of the Sedevacantist?
No.
Um, okay, so what was your childhood like in terms of were you Catholic growing up, Novus Ordo, and then
Yeah.
became traditionalist over time? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Novus Ordo Church.
Okay.
Uh, did all that stuff. Received communion. We don't. The mass is invalid. There's no valid communion or priests in the Vatican II sect, or at least there's the new rite of ordination is invalid. There's still some valid priests.
Oh,
Um, uh, yeah, I grew up a cradle Catholic, and then the more traditional I became, the more I realized that the sedevacantist position is true. So
is this something that your like your parents and siblings and anything came along to, or was this kind of you?
no, no, just me
Okay.
independently. My whole family rejects it.
Okay.
Um, my parents don't agree with it. So yeah,
Okay. And is you mentioned this, so I assume you had received like baptism, first communion, confirmation, and the Novus Ordo before, or I don't know how old
yeah,
you were when you kind of
yeah,
okay. That does the Sedevacantist position recognize baptisms under the Novus Ordo, right?
yeah.
Oh,
So baptism, anyone can baptize, even an
yeah,
atheist can baptize. So
right. As long as they
um,
use the right words or
yeah,
whatever.
matter form, yeah.
Mhm. Okay.
Um, so
So so I had sort of a similar path. Grew up cradle Catholic, Novus Ordo, but sort of my whole of course I was sort of teenager, kind of my whole family transitioned to traditional, although we went to like it was Society of St. Peter. And then a lot of them stayed. I am no longer a traditionalist, but I'm familiar with that. But there was a lot of people in that had formerly been members of the Society of St. Pius X. Does the Society of St. Pius X fall under this umbrella, or is that a different type thing?
no, I actually spent a grand total of 3 weeks with this SSPX
Hmm.
until I realized that you know we haven't had none of the Vatican II popes are valid. Excuse me. But yeah, they accept all the Vatican II popes, anti-popes, as valid popes. Um, they accept Francis as a valid pope,
Hmm.
um,
I
but
didn't.
they don't submit to him, which is really weird, you know.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. So, okay. So I have to think, and I could be wrong. I mean, even the Society of St. Pius X was small, I guess it seemed to me, but this must be a pretty small group of people, or at least
yeah,
population wise. How do you find churches? Like like is there one near you? Do you have to travel a long distance? Because even like when we were doing the the Society of St. Peter Mass, we were traveling an hour just to get to that mass.
yeah. There's very, 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 very few places to receive sacraments. Very few. So oftentimes I can't even make it to mass. You know.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
um, I've only been to Sunday mass a few times since my conversion. So that's just how sparse it is. So
Is there like a recognized order? Is there a bishop or someone or cardinal that says I am a sedevacantist, or is it just a combination of priests? Can you give me?
there So there's no order. It's if you're a valid priest and you accept the entire Catholic faith, the traditional Catholic faith, um, then I'll go to mass with you, or I'll attend your mass. As for bishops, there are sedevacantist bishops. The only ones I know of, they accept some heretical things, and yeah. So I don't really know of any bishop that I can submit to right now.
So how do you make new priests then? I mean, 1958, there can't be any. uh, there's got to be very few priests around from then, so you
Yeah.
need some sort of a bishop to ordain new priests. How does that work?
Well, there's still valid ordinations happening. Some priests convert, um, but yeah, I don't know if any bishop we have. Um, yeah, I don't know. But we like the the reason um, the reason things are like this is because we're definitely in the end times. So um, that's just how bad things are. You know.
Okay, and is there a sense for how much time we have left, or are we talking years, weeks, decades, centuries? How much time do we have left?
Yeah, we don't really know. We
Yeah.
just live one day at a time. Um, a couple of us seem to think that 70 years after Vatican II is like kind of like the cutoff date. But I mean, obviously, that you can't say that for sure.
We're
But
coming up
it
on
would
that,
seem
aren't we?
to make sense. What?
Yeah. We're coming up on 70 years, aren't we? How long has it been
Yeah,
since?
because the Jews were in a Babylonian captivity for 70 years.
Mhm.
Um, and so we're right now in a Babylonian captivity. So by what 2028, I don't know. I don't know what will happen. So I mean, you just got to make sure you're in a state of grace, hold to the traditional Catholic faith, and then you'll be saved. So time wise, it doesn't really matter. You just live for God. So
So it must be hard to find a priest to go to confession then.
confession is a little bit easier. There's a few priests I can go to, um, but still, it's not like I don't have confession on tap. So
Are they Sedevacantist priests that will do the confessions?
um, so anyone who explicitly rejects it, I don't go to. People usually, if I get the sense that they're kind of like sympathetic towards it, I'll go to them. Um, but then there's also Sedevacantist priests who hold the traditional Catholic faith um, that I'll go to. So for sure, definitely, without a doubt.
So
Um,
okay, well that sounds difficult. So my sense of, let's say, the Society of St. Pius X, and this could be completely based on nothing, is they're still ordaining bishops, still ordaining priests, and I guess I wasn't entirely sure how they viewed the Pope, if they thought the chair was empty or not. You're
yeah.
saying not. I don't have any reason to disagree. So I think they imagine that at some point in time we'll get the train back on the track here, and we'll have a pope that's both valid and all legit. Like, I think they're kind of like trying to hold things, but it seems to me, from what I'm hearing from you, that there is no. I mean, the end of the track is coming up. There isn't going to be a point where we have another pope, because I don't know how you'd elect a pope based on what
Right.
you're telling me. Can you correct me? I mean, is there a situation where the church gets back on track and we have popes and bishops that you would find acceptable?
So I mean, God could do whatever He wants. So if He wants to raise up another pope, He could. Um, but we think what's more likely is that the next person to inhabit the seat of Saint Peter is Jesus Christ Himself
Mhm.
when He comes back. So
Okay.
um, yeah,
Seems like he could do a good job as pope.
yeah, definitely. Since the Pope is only His representative, so I mean, when you have the real guy here. So
Okay. So, do people in the Sedevacantist, I'll say movement for lack of a better word, since there isn't an organization necessarily, do you get married and have babies and baptize them and all that kind of stuff?
yeah, you can get married. You just basically need a witness for that. Um, baptism, anyone can do. So, um, yeah, there's, I know some married sedevacantists. So,
When you say witness, are you saying that they don't necessarily need to seek
oh,
out a Sedevacantist priest, or is this something
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
How are they doing those weddings then?
I'm not entirely sure. I haven't really looked into that. I guess you
Okay.
just need like a deacon or something at least, or I don't know.
Okay. Huh.
But there are Sedevacantist priests, and so everyone really knows them. So I think I would assume they would just go to them. So um, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, are there any like so like how do you find each other? Is there like a website? Is there like an official publication, or is it just kind of the underground railroad here that you guys all find each other?
I guess through just like social media. We're on social media, and then we just kind of um, find each other, see who's commenting what, and stuff like that, and we become friends and stuff like that. That's how I found other Catholics. And then everyone else kind of just knows each other, and so I was kind of introduced to other Catholics through them, and so it's kind of like a thing.
So, I got to ask you this if you're comfortable answering it, but since we talk a lot about sexual morality and stuff like that, I'm assuming, maybe I shouldn't assume, but since Humanae Vitae post dates 1958,
Mhm.
kind of what's the Sedevacantist position on marriage and the purpose of marriage, procreation, unity, all that kind of stuff? Is it more or less marriage and intimacy is for the purpose of procreation and not really anything else, or can you comment on that?
Well, so according to Casti Canubii, um, there's two purposes of marriage. The first one is the procreation and education of children, and
Mhm.
then there's a few secondary purposes. And so, but you can't subvert those. You can't subvert the primary purpose uh, for the sake of the secondary purposes.
Mhm.
Such as like, um, the marital act.
So I assume most Sedevacantists are not fans of natural family planning. It's either
Nope.
you're completely abstinent, or you're not.
No.
You're all on or you're all off, I guess.
Well, no. So I mean, you don't have to be completely abstinent uh, until like until there's periods where new life can be brought forth, right? You can participate in the conjugal act as many times as you want, you know, um, as long as you're not uh, doing it specifically to avoid a pregnancy. That would be subverting um, the primary end of marriage. Hence, NFP is immoral to control birth. Um, you know, to try to get pregnant, that's not really an issue. Um, you know, but yeah, most people use NFP to avoid birth or to avoid a pregnancy, um, and that's mortally sinful.
And are you familiar with the calendar or the rhythm method? Have you heard of that before?
It's That's what NFP is, right?
Yeah, that's what they say. So let me fill in the blanks, and I'll ask you a question about it. So because I was actually in college, I don't remember. I was in college, and I went to a Catholic university, and there was a nun there teaching this, and she got up and said the rhythm method is the same as natural family planning, which is not. So the rhythm method is kind of what people Catholics used before natural family planning came out. So natural family planning is like actively monitoring signs and symptoms, whether it's basal temperature, mucus. Now we have ovulation testers that can detect hormone levels and stuff like that. So kind of like pinpoint in real time what's going on in a woman's cycle, when ovulation occurs, and all that. And that is generally speaking what natural family planning is. Prior to that, the calendar method was just understanding that, let's say an average 28-day cycle, ovulation generally occurs around the middle of that, give or take. So what people would do is just avoid avoid intimacy for, let's say, a week or two in the middle of the month, regardless of what was actually going on at the time. And so they would target certain parts of the month and avoid certain parts of the month, with the idea that we're less likely to get pregnant during the quote unquote target parts of the month. So it was a it was a very loose attempt, but not really measuring anything. But they were certainly avoiding certain parts of the month in favor of other parts of the month. Is that too much
Yeah,
effort on their part, you think?
yeah. Traditionally speaking, I mean, you wouldn't really monitor the woman's uh, her body, like the state of her cycle. Um,
Why is that?
I mean, you would just if you were trying to have a child, I mean, you would just keep trying, you know. Um, but most people don't try to avoid a pregnancy. Or Catholics don't try to avoid a pregnancy. Okay, in favor of just um, the marital union.
So prior to 1958, Catholics could not just, let's say, live as cousins for years at a time because they needed to not get pregnant. They were required to be constantly trying to get pregnant.
No, if certain situations arose, where uh, becoming pregnant would be an issue, um, you could be abstinent. However, plenty of saints had persisted, even in those times. Um, I
Persisted
forget
in what
who,
way? What do you mean? I'm
or
sorry.
like they would still uh, they wouldn't try to avoid a pregnancy, or they would just accept things as they happen. I know of one saint, I forget who exactly, but they were apparently born in a jail cell. You know, um, but it's this whole like idea that even if it's like natural, you can still use it. Even though it's birth control. No, that's wrong. Birth control is condemned by the church.
Yeah, certainly artificial contraception is forbidden by the church. That's continued even through post 1958 and Humani Vitae and all those. Um, Now, do you think it matters? Because my sense, and this could be completely wrong, is I mean realistically, whether people wanted to space children or not, really did not have a way to do it without, let's say, contraception until the mid 1900s. I mean, we started to have some things, but really, natural family planning in terms of like monitoring temperatures and ovulation really wasn't even available to people, whether they wanted to use it or not, until the um, mid 1900s, and it really, I would say, didn't really become uh, real reliable until the late 1900s and even the 2000s. And you know, so uh, does does that matter at all? Because when, let's say, back when Pius XI was writing Casti Connubii, he didn't like the idea of like using thermometers and ovulation testers was not even on the radar because it didn't really exist at that time. Does that matter at all?
No, it doesn't, because according to Catholic principles, you still have to follow Catholic principles no matter what.
Mhm, mhm.
And so, if you're uh, avoiding conception, um, it's wrong, because um, the primary end of marriage is to conceive and educate children.
So, under, let's say, the pre 1958 rules, if a couple was pregnant, so person's pregnant, you can't reprocreate. Is it still permissible to engage in the conjugal act even
Yeah,
while pregnant?
yeah,
How is that
because
reconcilable with the notion that you have
it falls under a the secondary purpose of marriage.
okay, which can be what?
Uh, I had the list. It's in Casti Konubi. Um, I would need a little bit to pull it up. Um, but yeah, I think there's three secondary um, purposes of marriage, and so if you subvert the primary in favor of the secondary, it's just wrong. So. it's in. All right, I don't have it, but it's in
Yeah,
the
I think
Catholic movie.
love
Yeah,
and
yeah,
companionship and
yeah.
roommates
Something like that. Yeah,
relationship.
yeah. Like mutual love. Um, yeah.
Well, it seems to me, and I get why people want to have the conjugal act while pregnant. I mean, I'm count me in that boat. Um, I it to me, it seems to me that it's an inconsistent system to say you can't use natural family planning or the calendar method or anything at all to avoid pregnancy. But once someone's pregnant or even after menopause, you can you can do it as much as you want. It there seems to me to be an incompatibility there, that an inconsistency that I think if you're going to really treat the procreative as the purpose, it, you treat that consistently, and so we just may have to agree to disagree there. And that fact is, no one would bother to get married if that was the circumstances, because that would just be
Well,
insanely difficult.
I mean, in those examples you mentioned, you know, menopause, pregnancy, you're not specifically trying to avoid a pregnancy. That's just how things work, you know. People that the large majority of people that use NFP, they're using it to avoid a pregnancy in favor of secondary purposes.
Hmm.
So,
Certainly true.
and that's a mortal sin.
Yeah, I hope not. Um,
Well,
yeah, well,
Mother Church says it is. So,
yeah, well, then there's going to be plenty of seating available in heaven. If that's the case. Um, so, so let me ask you this. So here's the other flip side to that that I think that approach is problematic about is if, let's say, husband and wife stumble upon some NFP material and they realize that for most women, ovulation is on day 14 or day 15. And they just decide, you know what, we're going to schedule something so that we are in separate cities on days 12 through 15 of every cycle. And we're going to, I'm just, husband's going to be out of the house for those 3 days. So we obviously can't do it. And is that, they're still likely to get pregnant anyway, because I'll tell you, you have a 5-day window before ovulation where sperm can live and stuff like that. But
yeah.
that's
Um,
gonna diminish the chances. It's certainly not gonna limit,
yeah.
prevent.
So
Is
they're
that too
still,
much?
yeah. So they're still trying to like uh, subvert the primary end. You know,
Well,
like
you're reducing, I would say,
right. So
reducing,
yeah,
but you're not eliminating the possibility of pregnancy.
right. So, but that's sinful as well. So you're trying to intentionally diminish that chance because you don't want to uh, get stuck with a pregnancy.
Mhm.
So that's sinful. If you can't handle another baby right now, you know you gotta either stay abstinent or I mean, or you just trust God. You know, just keep going and trust God, because that's what traditional Catholics, that's what they would do. Um, so
So, under the traditional Catholic method, we're not really using our reason for any of this. It's simply we're just kind of disposing ourselves to biology, and essentially the providence of God is what it sounds like to me.
I think it's entirely reasonable.
How
It's
so? Can you?
Catholic doctrine.
Well, I'm not saying it's not reasonable. I'm just we're taking out the capacity for human reason to make day to day decisions about things. And
I wouldn't I wouldn't phrase it like that.
yeah, I'm sure you wouldn't, but that's the way I would phrase it. Um, okay, all right. Well, as it is, I think less than 4% of Catholics even try to use natural family planning. And I have to think that the percentage of Catholics that sort of ascribe to this method has to be extraordinarily small. So you guys better get busy making babies.
I know a good Catholic family, so
Okay. Well, okay. Anything else about the Sedevacantist thing, or what we talked about that you'd like to cover? Feel free to argue, make your pitch, anything like that. I'm this is
um,
your choice.
yeah, so there is absolutely no salvation outside the Catholic Church. The Vatican II sect does not teach that. Uh, teaches religious indifferentism. Teaches that other religions should be reverenced when they're false. There's only one true religion. Um, and it teaches that you can pray with other religions. It's really bad. Um, yeah, so we should uh, focus on convincing others of the Catholic faith, um, adhering to the traditional Catholic faith. Um, yeah, so
Let me ask you one follow up on that. So you said you shouldn't pray with other. Uh,
you
is
shouldn't.
it? Do you consider it sinful if you stop in at, let's say, a Vatican II mass and pray while mass is going on? Is that because that's a different religion to you, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't go into a Vatican II mass um, and just start praying. Like even my own prayers, like I could just go home and pray my own prayers. I'm not gonna that false religion doesn't inspire me in any way, and it's like
So if you pass by a Novus Ordo church and they've got the rosary going on, do you think it would be sinful for you to stop in and participate in the rosary with them?
yeah, because they don't adhere to the traditional Catholic faith, so you can't even pray with those people.
Why
Uh,
is that? Like, why is that sinful for you to participate in that? Your rosary, I would assume, would be valid. If assuming you're
yeah,
in a state of grace and all that. Why?
well, they're praying. Well, assume they're if they're praying the rosary, it's valid. The rosary is a valid prayer, but you're not supposed to pray with people of false religions because praying with them um, signifies an agreement with their positions. So it's actually an act of apostasy, and Francis does that routinely.
Mhm.
Um, Benedict XVI, he's done that. John Paul II, he was the pioneer of that pretty much in his Assisi meeting. Um, yeah, it's just that's what the church teaches. If you're praying if you're participating in a false rite, your that prayer is an act of faith according to that religion. So, and on top of that, it's scandalous. So, like, if another Catholic walked by, saw me praying uh, inside Novus Ordo Church while that mass was going on, um, they would think I just defected. So, um, yeah.
Well, that's quite an extraordinary position. I can't wrap my head around what that's like, but you're entitled to your position, obviously. It must be difficult then. I mean, are there any other family members you have that are in this position? If you're alone, it must be difficult to go to weddings and funerals and all that. I suppose you just don't.
I don't go. Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's tough, but like that's the Catholic faith. So if there were more Catholics around, we wouldn't have this problem. But now we're
Mhm.
just such a small minority. Um,
Are, are there parts of the country that have sort of a cluster or critical mass of where you could actually have a parish and stuff like that that people
uh,
could?
yeah. Um, I mean, I know some Catholics that go to regular masses. They just kind of they moved closer to a priest that accepts the Sedevacantist position in the traditional Catholic faith. So,
Mhm.
um, But yeah, so I can't. I don't. I can't go to mass routinely though, so I'm not one of those people. So
Do you ever do you ever have any doubts or questions about your position, or are you just 100% certain, never lose sleep over it or anything like that?
no, never, never, ever.
Okay.
Once I discovered this position, it was like um, I found the pearl of great price. You know, um, I used to call myself Catholic and proud. Now I'm like I'm humbled because I could have had I could have been without the Catholic faith, you know, and be damned, you know. So um, I'm the happiest I've ever been. So
Well, good for you.
yeah.
I like to see people be happy. So okay, in wrapping up, and so I gotta ask this, and how the heck did you end up finding? We must have just shown up in your feed, but we are like, I can't even get the mainstream. Most of the mainstream Catholics don't necessarily like what we talk about. So you're like, we're on way ends of opposite ends of the spectrum. How the heck did you
Yeah.
stumble on our stuff?
I don't know. I just you popped up in my YouTube
Okay,
feed. And, yeah. So
all right.
on occasion I'll watch Novus Ordo videos to see what they're up to, and so I guess that's why.
Got to keep tabs on your enemy. I get that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you guys can convert. You know, so we don't have to be enemies. But
Well, I don't consider myself an enemy. I
well,
was loose, but uh,
um,
yeah.
but yeah, I would say like just one last thing, but a really good resource is Most Holy Family Monastery, VaticanCatholic.com. They go in depth into all these issues. They give you papal proof of every single of every single uh, position that we resist against the Vatican II sect. Um, so yeah, um, yeah.
And not to open up a whole new can of worms, but I do want to make this because I think I mentioned this in our comments. But for me, if I was faced with approaching sort of adopting the position you have, it would be really difficult for me not to at least wrestle with the possibility that Catholicism wasn't true or that the gates of hell did in fact prevail over it. Because this seems like a very bleak situation you have here, that it's hard for me to understand that the church that the Lord founded would go out with such a whimper. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but in from the standpoint of what I thought Catholicism was and what it built and all the churches and all that stuff, and then it just kind of goes out like this.
So
That's hard for me to reconcile with the idea that the gates of hell would not prevail against the church.
right. So Saint, I believe Saint Augustine said, even if the church were reduced to a small handful of people and a valid priest, it would still be the church. Um, all those things are various just externals, and you can't go off of externals. You have to adhere to the Catholic faith and her principles and her dogmas.
Mhm.
Um, and it's her principles and dogmas that led me to this position. Um, as for um, any sort of doubts, I mean, I never doubted the Catholic faith in my life.
Mhm.
Um, the second I heard that Catholicism was the one true faith, and that the church must be submitted to, you know, I held on to that. And so, I mean, if you follow these principles, this is where you arrive to. And Jesus did say, "When the Son of Man returns, will he find any faith on earth?" You know, things are going to be bleak. Things are bleak in these end times. So,
Okay.
yeah, that's totally.
Well, okay. Well, I'm glad you came on, and I hope I hope you found our conversation respectful. I enjoy talking to people of all different perspectives, and you've been very polite to us, even though we have very fundamental differences here. So I want to thank you for coming on, sharing your thoughts. I hope you'll continue following the channel and commenting on anything that you find helpful or distasteful. Probably mostly distasteful, but please speak your mind. And if you ever want to come on again, just reach out to us.
Okay, sure. All
So,
right, thank you.
thank you. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And until next time, everyone, have a good one.